Hey everyone, Data here to break down what the Montreal Canadiens have done so far in the 2025 NHL offseason, which I think has been a massive success so far. I've been away from the channel for the last couple of weeks as I was in the US to help my fiance move up to Canada for our wedding later this month, and I didn't get to react to a lot of what the Canadiens have done so far, so I thought that I would make a video now to break down what has been done and what is still left to do. So feel free to use the timestamps to navigate through my thoughts on the trades, free agency, and draft decisions made by Kent Hughes and company, as there is quite a bit to cover. And before I begin, a massive thank you goes out to our channel members here on YouTube, whose names will be running at the bottom, as a handful of them were able to fill in for me during free agency coverage on July 1st. Consider becoming a channel member yourself for awesome perks like these, as well as, of course, subscribing so that you don't miss out on any breaking news in the NHL, plus our multiple ongoing franchise mode series. So, ladies and gentlemen, what an incredible offseason for Montreal Canadiens fans such as myself. I think my takes are usually balanced enough, but of course I'm coming at it as a Canadiens fan, so I'm super excited about a lot of what the Canadiens have done, especially the Noah Dobson acquisition. That'll be the first thing to talk about here in the trade category. So I even went live from the backseat of a car in the middle of central US with barely any signal just to make a quick live stream about the Dobson acquisition. So the Canadiens acquire Noah Dobson from the New York Islanders, of course, in exchange for Emil Heineman and 2 first-round picks 16 and 17 in the 2025 draft that was. Now, picks 16 and 17 in the 2025 draft ended up being Victor Eklund and Kashan Aitchison. So great 2 selections there for the New York Islanders. I think they can be very happy with those 2 prospects. For the Canadian side of things, does it hurt a little bit more knowing that they could have gotten at least one of Victor Eklund, or definitely even Justin Carbonneau, who pretty much everybody and their mother had projected to the Montreal Canadiens? So does that hurt a little bit more? Yes, for sure. The Islanders got a couple prospects there. It could have gone a lot worse. I like how the Islanders made out with those 2 picks, and I am a little bit jealous as a Canadiens fan saying, imagine what could have been. But that does not dull my feelings at all for the joy I have in acquiring Noah Dobson. At the same time, you can only have so much joy for so long about prospects and ideas, and look at this guy and his potential, and in 2 years and 3 years and 5 years. The Montreal Canadiens are getting to a point where it's not win now mode or anything like that, but it's compete now mode. It's not win now mode, it's compete now mode. So Emil Heineman moving out to the Islanders, that hurts as well. Love Emil Heineman, did so much, so well, great penalty killer. The Islanders are going to love having him as they're getting younger as well. Plus those 2 prospects they just brought in, great news for the Islanders. Is it a fair return? I honestly can't say I watch, 82 games of Islanders hockey a year. I know that feelings surrounding Noah Dobson have been souring with the defensive woes on his side, but for the Canadiens to be moving from a position of power, excess value moving out, it's going to be the same with the Bolduc trade later, but excess value moving out. Heineman, great young forward for the middle 6, bottom 6, but there are players who can take his spot. 2 great prospects. Yes, that's great. That doesn't exactly fit the time frame the Canadiens are trying to go for right now. To get your first pair right-hand defenseman who's 25 locked into an 8-year contract makes all of this worth it. Now, Noah Dobson's value, it's hard to always, base everything on graphs and JFresh cards and Dom Luszczyszyn and all that, but at least according to the market value graph that we often see for players who sign contracts in the Twitter X-verse here, his market value, Noah Dobson, is at $9.9 million. That's even taking into consideration that his power play ice time will be dropping on the Canadiens, with Lane Hudson taking a lot of the power play 1 duties, and you would think Noah Dobson on power play 2. That also hurts, like, let's say, Mike Matheson's value. That's a question for another day. So Noah Dobson, strong top pair defenseman who should solidify the team's top 4 for years to come as an offensive pillar behind Lane Hudson, and he still has a lot of value at 5-on-5, and especially as the salary cap increases. I saw a lot of people saying, 9.5, that is way too much, but you got to take a lot of things in consideration. The salary cap is going up like crazy over the next few years, and the taxes in Montreal are ridiculous. For any player, as someone who is native to Montreal, any player who is not from Montreal, still ones who are from Montreal, but especially outside of Montreal, to move to Quebec and deal with the taxes and the language laws and the media and all that. I'm not even speaking negatively about it. I'm just saying it's a lot. I'm not saying it's necessarily negative. Some players might thrive off of that, but it's a lot. The taxes, the media, the language, all that. $9.5 million is perfectly fine to bring in a player as talented as Noah Dobson. Now, it says he's 26. When is he turning 26? He turns 26 next January. Say he is 25. The card just has him at 26 here for a moment. Sorry, I'm running through a couple things. So Noah Dobson, 25. He'll be 26. He was 25 and a half, actually. His value may never get as high as it was a couple of years ago when he went out and scored 70 points in 79 games of the Islanders. It might not ever get back to that point, but even him continuing to do what he does keeps his contract below market value, which is a good thing. Now, I don't want to talk about numbers all day long in terms of the contract. I want to see who Dobson is as a player. It's not all about the points. You'll see in 24-25, he was so valuable to the Islanders. Yes, defensive woes. Yes, transition, moving the puck, blah, blah, blah. But I have to say, it's not all about the numbers here. So you would think, oh, wow, 51 points in his first full season, then 49, then 70. Oh, my goodness. Oh my goodness gracious, down to 39 points in 71 games. He's finished. This is not a Josh Anderson situation where, well, he scored, almost 30 goals a couple years ago. Maybe he still got it. No, this is not that type of situation. I love Josh Anderson, but it's not cross your fingers and hope that there's some magic somewhere from a couple years ago. Alex Hemsky, Alex Semin, Ilya Kovalchuk, please, Sergei Gonchar. That's not what the Canadiens are doing right here. Noah Dobson is still 25 years old. I mean, look at the value that he brings as a player. The value, not just the points, the value that he brings. He's a top pairing offensive defenseman, skilled, capable of moving the puck in transition by joining the rush and sending stretch passes. Great shot as well. Doesn't play that physical in his own end, and defense has been inconsistent. So looking at over the last 3 years of weighted average data among defensemen, Noah Dobson's value has been growing very steadily in terms of the wins above replacement percentile rank. So the wins that you provide to your team above that of a replacement level player. So remove Noah Dobson from the New York Islanders and replace him with a seventh defenseman. How many more wins do the Islanders have thanks to Noah Dobson being in his position as opposed to playing a seventh defenseman there? That's what wins above replacement is in a quick little nutshell. So Noah Dobson, over the last 3 years, in the 83rd percentile, not a projected wins above replacement percentile. Even strength offense, 84th percentile. Even strength defense, 76th percentile, which I think people are forgetting a lot about. Goals, 91st amongst defensemen. Primary assists, 94th amongst defensemen. Finishing 87th. And drawing above average levels of penalties in 58th percentile. Not always playing against the highest levels of competition, nor with the highest levels of teammates. We'll say that, but I think you can kind of look past those two numbers, and when you look at the numbers on the right side, be a lot more impressed. So his value has gone from around the 25th percentile, like the 60th, 70th percentile, to somewhere in the 90th percentile plus in 24-25, the value that he provides to the Islanders, especially in his defense, gone from like the 5th percentile to the 45th maybe, to somewhere above the 90th percentile of even strength defense, and that's a huge jump. Meanwhile, the offense is still growing steadily from close to the 70th, now maybe in the 80th percentile. So Jay Fresh also goes on to say, I was lower on Dobson than Islanders fans were in 23-24 when he scored his 70 points, and now he's higher on him in 24-25 when he scored his 30 whatever points, and fans are a lot lower on him. Yes, he has his frustrating moments for sure, with Russian defense being in particular the weak point, but he tilts the ice quite well and does a lot of good stuff with the puck. This is just in 24-25. Look at this. Among defensemen at 5-on-5 per 60 minutes, he's in the 81st percentile of offense, even strength offense wins above replacement, 89th percentile for defense wins above replacement, 71st for power play, no penalty kill there, but still drawing above average levels of penalties in the 52nd, finishing 72nd, 80, 85th, 90th plus percentile for a bunch of different metrics here, goals, chances, defensive zone, shot assists, entry denial rate, you love to see that one, exits really important, rush offense, defensive zone retrievals, yes. Now, entry chance prevention, in zone offense, hits, not all the hallmarks of his game. But when I'm looking at this card and thinking about him as a top pair defenseman, this is exactly what I want to be seeing. Again, as Jay Fresh says, are there frustrating moments? Are there weaknesses? Yes. But what player doesn't have some weaknesses, right? Noah Dobson as the Canadiens' first pair right D of the future. It sends a clear message to the league, to your fans, to your players in the dressing room that we are ready to take that next step and we're not afraid to use the trade value to do so. Noah Dobson was a huge fish. The Canadiens got him, and that will provide a ton of stability to the defensive core here in Montreal. If you look at their cap situation, for example, so many advertisements everywhere, sorry about that. On defense, Dobson, Goulet, Carrier, and Hudson, I would think is your top 4 of the future. I love Mike Matheson, but he might very well, I would think, be gone after this next season. So who's going to be here 2 years and beyond? Dobson, Goulet, I think, is a pair, and Carrier, Hudson, I think, is another pair. That's at least the next 2 seasons. Now, what happens with Matheson, we'll find out. But right there, that's your top 4. Matheson could slot up, injuries, whatever. Fantastic. A lot to be excited about. So that's the Canadiens acquiring Noah Dobson, but they're also trading out Emil Heineman. Now, Heineman came to Montreal from the Toffoli trade. Heineman's been a part of 3 big trades now by the age of 23, being drafted in the second round by Florida, then traded to Calgary in the Bennett deal, then traded from Calgary to Montreal in the Toffoli deal, and then traded from Montreal now to the Islanders in the Dobson deal. I think Heineman's going to thrive in the Islanders system. I think he's going to be part of what they're trying to do there on Long Island. With the Canadiens, 10 goals and 18 points in 62 games in his first full NHL season. He had scored 29 in 48 in Laval last year in 23-24. As a Canadiens fan, I got to see him a lot, and I loved what I did see. I don't think he got enough ice time, honestly. Just there was a lot of competing players out there vying for that ice time. Some games as low as 7.5, but in the end, it did average out to 11.24 per night. And people don't think about this, throws the body a ton, 173 hits in 62 games played. This guy has the frame. He's 6'2", yeah, 6'2" exactly. He plays as if he's 6'4", and 6'2" isn't exactly small, but he really throws the body a lot. He plays with a ton of energy as well. Jay Fresh describes him as a speedy, shot-first, physical winger. Not much skill with the puck, but a high motor. Should be good bottom 6 forechecking contributor. Yes, absolutely. 98th percentile of even strength defense through his 60, how many games is it now? 66 NHL games, 98th percentile of even strength defense. Small sample size, but love to see it. Now the offense, the power play, the penalties, all that, not only is it not super impressive, but it's also too small of a sample size to really know a lot about. Same with the even strength defense. He does great, but playing 4th line minutes. Give him a larger role and see if it stays there. When the Canadiens did sometimes give him that larger role into that 11-12 minutes per night, then you could see it a lot more. Harder when it's 7.5, but you get what I'm trying to say. So the offense down here, finishing, hey, up here, had those 10 goals, but the defense, that is his hallmark. High motor, throws the body. The Islanders will love to have him. So the Islanders now with $3.875 million in cap space have Heineman as 2 more years as an expiring RFA after that at $1.1 million. If you look at the current depth chart, he slots in somewhere in that middle 6th, yeah, somewhere in that 4th line maybe. Shabunov now signing as well. We'll see if Duclair can get out of Patrick Waugh's doghouse and all that. Drouin came in. I like what the Islanders are doing. They're not quite there just yet, but I like the acquisition of Drouin, of Heineman. The prospects added to their system this year are very impressive. So all great things for the Islanders. The Canadiens, meanwhile, as we said a couple times already, Dobson on that no move clause that kicks in starting not this season, but the year after. So year 1, no trade clause. So here you go, a little bit easier to understand it like this. The 8 years at $9.5 million. Year 1, no trade clause. I find that very interesting. But then in years 2 to 8, the 14-team no trade list, which is still not a full no move clause. You can still be moved to a lot of different teams without having any say over it. So interesting to see the Canadiens factored that into the deal. So I've said a lot about Noah Dobson. I got to move on here. Love me some Noah Dobson. He eats huge minutes with the New York Islanders. He's been their top guy. Back-to-back years of 23 plus minutes per night. Finished 8th in Norris voting in 23-24. A down year in point production, but a down year for the Islanders as well. One of the worst teams in the league, unfortunately. Tough defensively. A lot of injuries to their defense as well. Adam Pelech injured. I believe Ryan Pulock was injured for a little bit as well. But he'll keep eating those minutes. He'll keep blocking those shots. He will do a lot for the Canadiens on that right side, which was so very much needed. And now he slots in there for the very foreseeable future. But I'm very much looking forward to the defensive core for 2025-26. All right, moving on. I won't break down draft pick trades because it just comes down to the Canadiens wanted their guy. Way too early to really talk much about who went where. Canadiens moved a couple seconds for a second and a sixth, but I will move past the draft pick trades. Moving on to Cayden Primeau. Not a lot to say about this one, just quickly going over. Cayden Primeau traded to his rights traded to the Carolina Hurricanes for a 2026 7th round pick. He himself was a 7th round pick back in 2017, drafted 199th overall. Cayden Primeau often inflated by Habs fans for no reason in my mind. I don't know why. Cayden Primeau ended up playing 55 games as a Montreal Canadien from 2019 to 2025. So sometimes the backup, sometimes a call-up. Didn't really impress me with the Rocket up until he was sent down in 24-25 after stinking it up with the Canadiens in the NHL. Then had ridiculous numbers at a .927 save percentage. Fell apart in the playoffs, sadly. A terrible time to do so. And now he gets traded his rights to the Carolina Hurricanes, where they can use him a little bit more because the Canadiens now with Dobish, especially with Kakinen, who we'll talk about in a couple minutes, with Fowler coming up, joining the NHL, AHL system, whatever you want to call it, there's just no more room for Cayden Primeau. It's time to end the Cayden Primeau experiment. Thank you for getting him. Just the Canadiens and the Flyers keep swapping sevenths so often, and that was one of those picks that came from that. The Hurricanes always somehow produce fantastic defense and goaltending, or maybe the goaltending is from the fantastic defense, but maybe he'll have some sort of level of success within the Hurricanes organization where Freddie Anderson's always getting injured, and who knows when they need a third or a fourth goalie to get called up. So Cayden Primeau, I wish you all the best. We can finally stop hearing Mailloux, Primeau, Machar, and a conditional second for Sidney Crosby because he's the future Vezina winner. We move on from Cayden Primeau, and hey, 7th round pick back for it, why not? Now the next one, I love this trade. Zach Bolduc coming to the Montreal Canadiens in exchange for Logan Mailloux. Now, first let's talk about Zachary Bolduc, who had a fantastic end to the season as well. Ended up with 19 goals and 36 points with the Blues in 24-25, but a lot of that came after the Four Nations break. He had a strong finish to the season. Over the last 3 years, according to weighted average data, but again, really just 97 games played over the last couple seasons. He's in the 86th percentile projected wins above replacement. Keep in mind, that's with about 4th line ice time. He's averaging 12.36 in his career. He was averaging 12.48 this past season, but still, he's in that 86th percentile, 43rd of offense, 88th of defense. Okay, I see you, Zach. Finishing 91st, goals 87th. Now, primary assists, drawing penalties, or taking penalties, I should say, and not playing as high levels of competition. Neither is he playing with high levels of teammates. But he is a young, high-motor guy who scored efficiently and forechecked hard for the Blues this season, scored 19 goals in 4th-line minutes. Also, if you just saw over here, finished 8th in Calder voting. 8th in Calder voting, how about that? So Bolduc, I think, was doing a great job for the Blues, moving around in their lineup. He was, yes, averaging in total 4th line minutes, but look, some games he's playing 15 minutes per night, stuff like that. He was being trusted with a larger role in that second half of the season as the goal scoring heated up. Ends as a plus 20 and a lot of hits as well, 108 hits in not just 72 games, but 72 games playing 12.48. And he shows the potential to be given a lot more ice time, more of a 3rd line middle 6 guy, kind of like what Heineman was doing, but maybe not as strong defensively, but the same level of forechecking, of motor, a lot of the same physicality, and just maybe a better finishing touch. And of course, nous sommes très contents parce que nous avons un gars de Trois-Rivières sur le Canadien. He comes from Trois-Rivières, from the province of Quebec, whereas Logan Mailloux, who had a French name, was actually from Belle River, Ontario. So, you know, pas un gars de chez nous, tu sais. So now, Logan Mailloux, though, there's no card on him because his NHL experience is limited to just 8 games. However, in the AHL with the Laval Rocket, 33 points in 63 games. Logan Mailloux is an interesting story, but without getting into his character, I will say this is an incredible ROI from something that Marc Bergevin did back in the 2021 draft, where Mailloux was being passed on by teams for all those reasons. He said, don't draft me. The Canadiens took a risk. Should they have done it? That's a question for another day. But they draft him 31st in 2021, and they ended up trading him for the guy who went 17th in that same draft, had all those Calder votes and everything, and in the end, in my opinion, get the better player. Different positions for sure, but the better player value-wise. The St. Louis Blues are in desperate need of some young defense on their team. We look at their depth chart right now, look at the defense available to them. Cam Fowler, 33, Parayko, 32, Broberg, of course, yes, 24, then Falk, 33. They had, who else out here? Ryan Suter. There he is, yeah, 40-year-old Ryan Suter, expiring UFA, who was not re-signed. In the system, yes, there's Adam Yurchek, yes, there's Theo Lindstein, but I know there's other names, but there's not a lot else for the future of the blue line here in St. Louis. So they move from a position of not a ton of excess, but they do have Jimmy Snuggerud, they do have Dvorsky, they do have Holloway, they do have some younger players who are able to move up in that lineup. And, Kyrou and Thomas aren't exactly old either. They're in their mid-20s now. So the Blues are moving from a position of, again, not totally excess, but they do have some players who can cover. Meanwhile, the Canadiens move from a position of total excess. They had a ton of flexibility. Sorry, I'm trying to find the right page here. Here it is. A ton of flexibility in terms of their defense. Logan Mailloux is not going to find a spot on the team this year. Jaden Struebel's having a hard enough time trying to find his spot. Arbor Xhekaj as well. And that's not even to mention David Reinbacher. We're waiting to see what's going to happen with him. Now, aside from that, I wouldn't really put much stock in any of these names, but David Reinbacher already is going to be having to come to the NHL sooner rather than later. Struebel's a question mark. Xhekaj, where's he going to go? Matheson, you're putting him on the third pair now after he scored like 60 points a couple of years ago. What's going to happen there? So the Canadiens had an excess, not only in defense, but also in the future of their blue line, especially considering the acquisition of Noah Dobson, which is another spot that's spoken for the next 8 years or so. So moving Mailloux is one thing, but to get back that kind of value in Zach Bolduc, I am very impressed that the Canadiens were able to pull that off, that Kent Hughes was able to pull that off. And it's not that, we fleeced the Blues, woo, woo, woo. It's that the Blues were in a tough spot. They said, okay, we could move this guy and get a need. Do we want to move that guy per se? No, we've liked him. He's done well in his role. He has a future here, but that need is weighing on us more and more heavily as the months and the years go by. So the Canadiens take advantage of that situation. The guy they drafted 31st in exchange for the guy who went 17th in that same 2021 draft. And now coming back to this chart over here, again, since there's not enough data to have no pun intended, a player card on Logan Mailloux, we could look at this, where in the 2024-25 season, in just the 7 games that he played, again, just 7 games, he scored 4 points, he had that offensive flair, the Blues are excited to see that, that's good, but I will say, in expected goals for versus expected goals against for a defenseman at 5v5, all the defensemen in the NHL, there is one that stands out ridiculously, and that is Logan Mailloux, all the way in very negative defense. The expected goals against per 60 at all the way at over 6.5, while the goals for per 60, expected goals for per 60 is around 3. So the plus offense is nice, not super high, but high. But that expected goals against per 60 is a crazy outlier. Keep in mind, there are other Canadiens defensemen that aren't super far off who are also all in the negatives here too. But to say that he is such an outlier, wow. Just a 7-game sample size, but I'm okay with the Canadiens moving on from Logan Mailloux. And to say that we get back Zach Bolduc, who, again, looking at his contract situation, didn't have that up for you just yet. Sign on for 1 more year and then an expiring RFA. Yeah, I will say thank you very much. Meanwhile, the Blues have the same thing. Yes, 1 more year, expiring RFA. If you look at their depth chart, now you say, okay, Mailloux slots in there right away. Not even a question mark in the AHL. He should be in their top 6 next year. And meanwhile, the Montreal Canadiens, looking at their depth chart, so many different tabs here, apologies. Looking at their depth chart, right away Bolduc is in that bottom 6. Now, could you swap Gallagher and Bolduc? Absolutely. Is there still a lot to talk about the second line center? Yes, we'll get to that later on. But Bolduc, I would think, is slotted in for the 3rd line to start the season, and he could very quickly get into that top 6 as un gars de chez nous, who's going to have a good finishing touch. The fans will be salivating to see more Bolduc in this lineup. So, happy to see that trade made, and I put that in the win category for Mr. Kent Hughes. Bolduc done. There you go. So I think that's about it for the trades. Yes, those are the trades made by Kent Hughes over the course of the offseason so far. So for all that's said and done now for the two major trades made by the Canadiens, sorry that was a bit of a longer portion. I promise that I'll run through the rest a bit more quickly. I just really wanted to dive into those two big trades. Now we'll go through things a bit more quickly, I promise. Starting with free agency / extensions signed as of July 1st. Just telling you a little bit about each player in case you might not be so familiar with them. Mostly minor league contracts, but let's run through it. Starting with Kaapo Kähkönen, signed 1 year, $1.15 million, kind of like the Caden Primo replacement. He's a 28-year-old goaltender from a 4th round pick in 2014. Started with Minnesota, went to San Jose, did a stint there for a little while. 6 games with the Devils, then 1 game with the Avalanche before being in the AHL and jumping around to 3 different teams, the Eagles, the Moose, and the Checkers in 24-25. So he's been traded around a little bit already from waivers and then being traded for Chris Drieger from the Jets to the Panthers. So I think that although he's had NHL experience, he definitely is more of an AHL goaltender at this point. He could get called up in a pinch for sure, but I would anticipate that Dobish will still be the backup in Montreal. I think Kähkönen will get his chance. That's why he was signed for the $1.15 million that he was, not like an $800K type thing. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's spending more time in Laval this year. Good extra goaltender option that I think gives you a bit more confidence than Caden Primo was. So I'm okay with that signing. No problem at all for Kaapo Kähkönen. Next up, Sammy Blais, of course. Une autre gars de chez nous. Monsieur Legault est très content. 1 year at $775K for the 29-year-old forward. He actually just turned 29. Now, Sammy Blais at one point had a lot of potential. I remember in franchise mode and all that. And he's won a Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues in 18-19. He won an AHL championship with the Abbotsford Canucks this past season, 40 points in 51 games. He has not played in the NHL since 23-24. He scored 1 goal and 7 points in 53 games with the Blues. If I had to guess, I don't think that Blais will be in the NHL very much at all this season. Being from Quebec definitely gives you an advantage to get a game or two, but I would say he is a Laval signing, and I'm sure that he'll do quite well for Laval. 40 points in 51 games on a championship team in Abbotsford, fantastic. So he'll be in Laval, a 4th line option, be called up if needed. Yeah, no problem with me. Sammy Blais, bienvenue mon ami. Next up, Nathan Clermont, 1 year, $775K. This is a pure Laval signing, absolutely. 1 NHL game with the Penguins in 24-25, but coming off of a 31-game season with the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, where he had 11 points in 31 games. 27-year-old defenseman who was a 6th round pick back in 2016. Next up, Alex Belzile, a guy that we know very well if you're a Canadiens fan. Undrafted 33-year-old who played, all 44 games of his NHL career with the Montreal Canadiens before he walked to free agency, signed, I think, a 2-year deal. 2-year deal with the Rangers. 50 points in 61 games with Hartford in 23-24, then 56 in 66 this past year in 24-25 with 119 penalty minutes. He got angry this year. He's quite a story from the QMJHL to the ECHL to the AHL, finally to the NHL. Another Montreal native as well from Rivière-du-Loup. So the 33-year-old will once again be a mainstay for the Laval Rocket, and I wouldn't be surprised, kind of like Sammy Blais, but more that it's not just let's promote him, just to give him a shot. It's more that, hey, we've seen him do well in this 4th line role before, 14 points in 31 games. Let's try and do that again when problems or injuries come in. So Blais and Belzile, definitely 2 guys who are going to get called up, be the first on the list to be called up when the time comes. Next up, Sean Farrell. This is an extension, 1 year at $775K for the former 4th round pick of the Canadiens. He was drafted from the Chicago Steel, went to Harvard University, 53 points in 34 games in 22-23, appeared in 6 games as well after his time at Harvard, scoring 1 goal in 6 games, then 2 full years in Laval now. Last year, 44 points in 67 games. I can't say I watch a ton of Laval hockey, but I do follow them, of course, and I'm liking the development in Sean Farrell's game. 1 year, $775K, stay as an RFA, see what you do for 1 more year. Will he get to finally see maybe, 10, 15, 20 games in the NHL? I wouldn't hold my breath, but I would say that it's time to start thinking about giving him that opportunity. If he's going to be 24 by next offseason, he's still going to be a career AHLer. It's going to have to be a really good year in the AHL to convince management that it's time for another 1-year deal, let's say. He has to force his way into the NHL lineup because the Canadiens might not be thinking to call him up necessarily, even though they should be. They might be thinking more about Belzile, fourth line role, a guy we can trust. No, take a risk. Roll the dice on Sean Farrell. I want to see him in the NHL this year. Next up, Mark Delgaizo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Not a guy that you see too often, especially in the Eastern Conference. Delgaizo is a former 4th-round pick in 2019. He's played 55 games, all with the Nashville Predators. Last year, appearing in 46 games, scoring 9 points. So this guy definitely enough NHL experience to say, hey, let's put him in as 7th D. Let's keep him as a healthy scratch, whatever it might be. Not a guarantee for Laval, even though he did score 12 points in 30 games with the Milwaukee Admirals last year. Mark Delgaizo is a 25-year-old on a 1-year deal. Hey, that's the type of guy that you want in your AHL system. Guys with some NHL experience and who are hungry to get back to the show. And finally, William Trudeau. Actually, not finally, final skater, William Trudeau from Varennes, de la Province du Québec, 19 points in 68 games last year as a defenseman, former 4th-round pick in the 2021 draft. Another guy who, if he's going to make it, you got to think about calling him up sooner rather than later, to at least give him a few games here and there. But the blue line is so stacked, I would not, again, hold my breath too much on William Trudeau. So I consider that a signing more for Laval than anybody. And finally, we have Jacob Dobesh, who was signed to a 2-year deal, actually. Yes, 2 years at $965K per year. He's going to be an expiring RFA as well, which is good to know. Former 5th-round pick of the Canadiens back in 2020. Really burst onto the scene in 2024-25, appearing in 16 games, pretty much coming in relief of Caden Primo. In those 16 games, a shutout, going 7-4-3, 909 save percentage. I loved seeing Jacob Dobesh. I think that he could be a legit backup goalie. 6'4", 24 years old, getting his feet wet, getting good experience. I'd say the job is his to lose. Kakinen will be looking over his shoulder. I think Dobesh can remain as the Canadiens' backup. He just has to continue, not necessarily doing miracles, but he has to continue at this pace, if not a little bit better. And you saw, unfortunately, when Montembeault was injured in the postseason in 2025 here, he had to shoulder a lot of that load. It was a lot for him. 1-2, 2.91 goals against, 881 save percentage. But he held his own. I got to say, he held his own. That's Dobesh there. Yeah, that's all the extensions and everything for the Canadiens. Very good. Now we get to the draft itself. I'm not going to say a big, long thing about every draft pick. I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the Elite Prospects draft guide and give you the elevator pitch on each prospect. So at 34th overall, the Canadiens drafted Alexander Zhuravsky, the guy who they were even thinking about taking with one of their first 2 picks at 16 and 17. They get him all the way at 34. Elite Prospects had him in the 34 to 55 range, shades of Andrei Kuzmenko, and the elevator pitch on him is a winger with elite hands and a unique development path makes for a real boom or bust type of NHL draft pick. 50 points in 45 games in the MHL over in Russia. Very exciting to have him in the Canadiens organization. And that was their first pick, made at 34th overall. Right up next in the draft guide, after Zhuravsky was ranked 42nd, at 43 is Hayden Papanikis, who the Canadiens drafted at 69th overall. He's just over 6'4", shades of a more skilled Adam Lowry, a tough physical center with puck skills, mobility, and defensive upside. A little bit more consistency required, but he's poised for a breakout season. Just 16 points in 63 games with the Swift Current Broncos of the WHL, but a lot more to come from Papanikis. At 81, the Canadiens drafted Bryce Pickford, who Elite Prospects had at 95. He is a detailed defenseman turned goal-scoring phenom, one of the draft's feel-good stories. He has the shot, but can he develop the rest? In the WHL with the Medicine Hat Tigers, 20 goals and 47 points in 48 games from the just over 6-foot defenseman. 1 pick later at 82, the Canadiens drafted Arseny Radkov, a player not ranked by Elite Prospects, a wild card amongst the goalie class, explosive, and one of the younger players. Very interesting to see. In the MHL this past year, 19 games played, 3.18 goals against average, 918 save percentage. Definitely a very long-term project for the Canadiens, but I like the potential that Radkov could have here for the 82nd selection. At 113th overall, the Canadiens drafted who Elite Prospects has at 73 on their rankings. LJ Mooney, a very exciting player that Canadiens fans were excited to have. A tiny yet physical winger with dynamic skating and handling. He has the tools to play in the NHL at his size, but he must develop his reads and playmaking further. With the U.S. National Under-18 team, the development program, he scored 8 goals and 35 points in 40 games. At 145th overall, the Canadiens made an interesting pick here with Alexis Cournoyer, a 6'4" goaltender who is a late rising goalie with a fun backstory that uses size to his advantage. He is 19 and a half. He turns 20 in December. And you gotta say his numbers are very impressive, especially in the QMJHL, where in 21 games he had a 1.82 goals against average, 942 save percentage, and 3 shutouts. At 177th overall, the Canadiens drafted who Elite Prospects has at 104th, interesting, Carlos Handel, a smooth skating blue liner whose composure on puck makes him an asset in transition. Lots of defensive growth this season, but needs to add more pace and urgency. 26 points in 52 games with the Halifax Mooseheads. And finally, with our last 2 picks, guys who Elite Prospects didn't have anything about, Andrew McNeil, a 17-year-old defenseman from the Kitchener Rangers, drafted 189th. He had 3 assists in 33 games this past year. And finally, with their 7th-round pick, Max Vig, 19-year-old defenseman from the Cedar Rapids Rough Riders, 32 points in 62 games there in the USHL. So all that to say, not a bad draft for the Montreal Canadiens, considering especially that they moved picks 16 and 17. Still some good prospects added to the system on top of guys like Hage, who the Canadiens didn't have to move to acquire Dobson, Reinbacher, who we're still crossing our fingers on, of course, Demidov, who we can't wait to see more of in the NHL this season. There's a lot to be excited about for the Montreal Canadiens, both in the now and in the future. So a solid draft. I like what the Elite Prospects cards had to say about those guys. I think some smart picks, especially with what the Canadiens we're dealing with. I'm happy with what Kent Hughes decided. Now, I'll finally end on what the Canadiens might still have to do here in the 2025 offseason. Kent Hughes has addressed some massive needs. Noah Dobson on that right side for the next 8 years, boom. Zach Boldzuk, an improvement in the finishing and the youth in the bottom 6 and all that, great, fantastic. But the big question mark, I think, has to be Kirby Dach. Now, at full health, Kirby Dach could, maybe not just yet, but he could still definitely grow into the second line center of the Montreal Canadiens. Your first line is still going to be Caulfield, Suzuki, Slafkovsky, absolutely. Is Dach the guy for Demidov? I don't know, but he could definitely be the second line of the Montreal Canadiens if he were to finally just stay healthy. That's feeling more and more impossible, sadly, but it's a reality that's there. Now, the Canadiens content to say, let's roll the dice on trying to get a full healthy season out of him and actually giving him that chance to get there? Or, what might the contingency plan be? I don't think Jake Evans can be that guy. Oliver Kapanen, can't wait to see him in the NHL. I don't think he can be that guy. Owen Beck, can't wait to see him in the NHL. Don't think he can be that guy. If we go back to the summary here in the roster, the Canadiens, when you take into consideration that Carey Price's $10.5 million will be there, that leaves you about $5 million in cap space, unless you're moving out Mike Matheson, whatever else. Now, who else is in the system ready to come up at center? Not really anyone, no, that who I already didn't say, such as Owen Beck. Now, who's still out here as potential UFAs or RFAs? Of course, trades could happen at any time, but who is potentially out here? So first for the UFAs, I don't think there's much to really say. Looking at it like this might be better, actually. Jack Roslovic is definitely an interesting one, but do you want to commit to that? If the Canadiens, if you could have gotten P.S. Suter, let's say, at the deal that he signed in St. Louis, the 2 years, $4 million, would you even really want that? It just adds to the mix of middle 6 guys. Who is actually a legit top 6 centerman that Canadiens could go out and acquire, whether it be by trade or free agency? No one is really out here any longer. Jack Roslovic, is he that guy? I don't know. But then scrolling down, Luke Cunnin, Robbie Fabry, guys who could play center. Joe Veleno's been linked to the Canadiens, but still, he's your 4th line guy, probably at best. There's no one here in unrestricted free agency. You gotta look at the restricted free agents, and it's hard. Gabe Vilardi's gonna resign. Marco Rossi would be by trade, but it's hard not to look at Mason McTavish. Now, he has been in so many rumors that it's almost like being a dead horse right now. Who knows if the Canadiens even have what the Ducks would be looking for. But Marco Rossi or Mason McTavish could be 2 huge targets for the Montreal Canadiens to think about acquiring. If I'm Minnesota or Anaheim, I'm not trading either of them, but it seems as though there's a disconnect. There has been some shopping. They've been listening to phone calls. Would the Canadiens even have what these 2 teams are looking for? That's the question. Marco Rossi, I'd love to have him. Bit of a, kind of fits the Canadiens mold of not always having the biggest centerman. Do you want Suzuki and Rossi as your 2 top 6 centermen? You can't always look at size. I think the league is evolving in that that way. Marco Rossi plays a lot bigger than his size as well. He has crazy strong legs like tree trunks. I don't know if you've ever seen those. And he just scored 60 points in 82 games on a pretty good Minnesota Wild team. I would be content with the acquisition of Marco Rossi if the Canadiens were to do that, despite the size that he has. I would still be content. I'd also be content with Mason McTavish, the 3rd overall pick in 2021, who is now 22, 52-point season last year in 76 games. He's played 3 full NHL seasons. Mason McTavish would definitely be that guy to go as second-line center, and then we'll see what happens from there. Suzuki gets injured, you can slot him up. Yes. Is there anyone else who could slot up the first-line center in the Canadiens organization if Suzuki's out for even 5 games? Not really. Jake Evans in a pinch for half a game, sure. But if you're fighting for that wild card spot or even a divisional spot, and your top line centerman is going to be out for 5, 10 games, not crazy, but enough that it makes a difference at the end of the year, you got to have someone who can slot up. And whether it's McTavish or Rossi or somebody else, the Canadiens need to either get that player or see that development from Kirby Dach. And if they're not seeing that development, they got to make a change somewhat quickly. Now, would the Ducks or Wild even be thinking about a trade piece like a Mike Matheson? I don't know, the Ducks have a ton of cap space, but their defense is pretty much set. There's some good young defensemen here in Anaheim. I don't think any of these 6 guys would come out for Mike Matheson. Not that Matheson isn't better, but I don't think you would take out any of these guys. You want Helleson to finally get that ice time now. You're a bad team, Anaheim. You want to, to give them that opportunity and not just bring in Matheson for what reason. I don't know. They're really pushing this year. They just got Kreider. They just got Granlund. I don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe they are. But they have enough cap space to re-sign McTavish. It's more of a philosophical disconnect, I suppose. Minnesota Wild, they have enough money as well at $10 million. What's the issue here? I don't know. But if we look at defense again, Middleton's going to be on the first of a 4-year deal. You're not taking him out. Faber, Spurgeon, Boyum, Jiricek, they're all playing. Maybe Bogosian comes out. I guess that could be it. And then Matheson enters the top 6 that way if the Canadiens are making a deal with him being the main part of the return. I don't know. What do they even want? I'm just speculating. But all that to say, the Canadiens need to consider, whether it be through Target or just Kirby Dach developing, they need to consider who is going to fill that second-line center position and have a big responsibility in playing with Ivan Demidov and even having to be a little bit more responsible defensively, potentially, for Patrick Laine's shortcomings on that second line as well. So there's a lot to say about the offseason that has been and that will be in the year to come for Montreal Canadiens. But that's my breakdown as a Habs fan through the trades, free agency, draft. I'm very, very content. I think the Dobson trade and the Bolduc trades are both slam dunks. It costs value, it costs cap space, but that's how it works when you're, again, not a win now mode team, but you're a compete now mode team. The Canadiens are in compete now mode, and there are compete now things that they're doing and still yet to do, i.e. that acquisition of a second-line center. Could Newhook play there? Could Dach play there? Could even Evans maybe play there a little bit? Sure. But if you're going to be a serious wildcard or even divisional position contender for the playoffs, I think that position has to get a little bit stronger. So now I pose a question to you. What do you think about the Canadiens offseason that has been? What were their best parts, their worst parts? What is still yet to be done? What would you like to see Kent Hughes and company do? Leave all those thoughts down here in the comments on YouTube or over in our Discord server, link in the description. We're over 700 people there, always talking hockey, especially breaking news notifications that come your way before just a couple minutes later, the video comes out with the breaking news live stream. So subscribe, hit that bell to be notified of all the breaking news in the National Hockey League, as well as all of our many franchise mode series, career simulations, and much, much more. If you enjoy hockey and management style things like that, this is the channel for you. Take a second to check it out. I'm sure that you would enjoy it. So thank you once again for watching and for listening. I'm looking forward to reading all your thoughts and seeing you once again in the next one as we move further into the 2025 NHL offseason.